40 years ago, almost exactly to the day today, 1979, I went to my first rock concert. The band was Styx, and the song that was on the radio a lot back then, their hit song, was called The Grand Illusion. And the last line of that song is an interesting quote. "We made the grade, and still we wonder who the hell we are." And I always think of that quote when, especially seniors come into my office at Bentley. They've studied something for 4 years, and now they're starting to wonder who the hell they are. Like, what am I going to do after graduation? I've majored in this or I've majored in that, but I'm not quite sure that's the right fit. And some people on the outside might think, well, that's crazy, right? I mean, they've spent all this time getting there. How do they not know? And I can tell you it's not crazy because it happened to me 35 years ago. I graduated from college in 1984, and basically for almost 3 decades, I spent my time moving from job to job, really just kind of being extraordinarily ordinary. I never really felt like I had found my fit until I came to Bentley a few years ago as a full-time educator and realized that I had finally found a place where my inner skills and my strengths really translated into impact on the world. I've never worked harder in my life. I've never loved what I've done more. But honestly, I've never felt more limitless than what I do today. And I'm hoping to share part of my story to help you maybe feel more limitless and to get there a lot sooner than it took me. So back in 1983, this was what we used to do for selfies. We didn't have smartphones, so we just used to draw each other. And I came across this, I had hair then too, so it looks a little different. I was a junior at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, WPI, a great engineering school. How I ended up at WPI was all through school. I was great at math and science. In high school, I had high SAT scores in math. I was the son of immigrants, and so becoming an engineer was the thing that they said was the safe path to take. And I know we've heard that a few times today. What was kind of lost in all of that was I actually had higher SAT scores in verbal and reading, and as much as I liked math and science, I actually enjoyed art and English, especially creative writing, even more. But when I narrowed down my choices of college, it came down to going to WPI and becoming an electrical engineer, or going to Brown University and majoring in journalism. And the environment that I found myself in, my friends and my family and my guidance counselors all encouraged me to go to WPI because, and I know some of you have heard this before too, if you get a degree as an engineer, you'll always have a job. It's a safe path to take. Oh, by the way, if you want to write and you want to draw your little pictures, you can do it on the side. So there I was a junior, and I think back to WPI, the most memorable thing that I did as a student at WPI was teach physics. It was a project called the Interactive Qualifying Project, which is one of their core curriculum elements at WPI. And it kind of fell into my lap. I wasn't looking for this project, but it fell into my lap. Think of the IQP as sort of service learning for engineers. You're supposed to find a need at the intersection of science and society and fill it as an engineer. And so I had the opportunity to teach physics twice a week to 40 students at a private high school in Worcester. I loved that job. I loved that project. It gave me the opportunity to model my teaching after the great teachers I had all through elementary school, middle school, and high school. I became a storyteller of physics. I was able to come up with sort of crazy and wacky ideas to break down these complex concepts into easy to digest modules, if you will, for the students to internalize. I got a chance to go into class every day and perform and talk and do public speaking. When it was all over, I wrote a paper about my experiences. That paper was 100 pages long, written on a manual typewriter, by the way, and illustrated with my drawings. So up there you've got some pictures of examples that I used in class: nearsighted birds running into buildings and falling to the ground, a mouse running across ice, being chased by a cat. Will he survive? Will he not? This was the kind of experience I had, and I loved every minute of that experience. About 5 years after that, I was out socially with a bunch of friends, and one of my former physics students came up to me, gave me a big hug, and said, "I loved physics because of you. And because of you, I went to WPI, and I became a mechanical engineer, and I work as an engineer now, and I love it. And I looked at her and I said, I didn't think you had any interest in physics, from what I recall, right? And she said, no, I did, and science was always so boring, but you made it come alive. And that impact really hit me, obviously. I was flattered, I was humbled. It was one of those moments in my life where I thought, I'm going to take the world by storm. Unfortunately, those kind of moments were very few and far between in my corporate engineering, project management type career. You can contrast those experiences really with my first job out of college. I was in a rotational program at a large multinational company. I was in engineering. There were 30 of us that had come out of college all together from different schools around the country, and we rotated into different assignments every 6 months to find out what kind of engineering we wanted to sort of focus on in our career. During that time, we were also part of a cohort. We were all taking classes and working towards our master's degree at RPI, another great engineering school. Every week, we did our assignments. Every week, the assignments were graded. And every week, the director of the program at this company would post the grades that everyone received in ranked order from 1 through 30. And I'm proud to say, really proud to say, that my work made it possible for the rest of the cohort to be in the top 90% of the class. I never scored any higher than 28th out of 30. And at first, I really started to think, like, what is wrong with me? I was told I was smart. I was told I was special. I should be better at this. And the work was, frankly, boring. The town that we were in was kind of dreary. And I became very unhappy. I started asking myself, why am I so unhappy? Why am I so unsuccessful compared to my peers? And it really started to bother me. And only in hindsight have I realized sort of what happened or what went wrong. The definition of happiness for the ancient Greeks had a definition called eudaimonia. And when you look at their definition, it is the joy you feel while striving towards your potential. When I think back to teaching physics as a junior at WPI, I realize now that my potential was being revealed in that class. And my potential was being revealed outside the classroom at WPI every day. I was class president one year. I was interfraternity council president. I used to be the one who always volunteered to write the reports for my project teams and get up and do the presentations. Those were my skills. Those were my strengths. And my potential was being revealed all the time. But I was running away from my potential in all these sort of engineering jobs that I was taking and trying to find my place. And I was basing so much of my on my knowledge and my ability to do work that I wasn't really the best at, that it really started to bother me. And so if you define happiness as what you strive towards to reach your potential, you then have to ask yourself, so what, right? We all have to work. Why do we want to chase happiness? Why is that so important? Well, there's been studies done, one recently done by the Gallup organization, that says we lose $300 billion a year in lost productivity due to unhappy employees. Physicians are about 19% more accurate and quicker in their diagnosis when they're happy. We want happy doctors, right? Salespeople are 37% more effective when they are happy. There's a health element to this as well. People who are generally happier have lower blood pressure, lower heart rate, lower stress hormones in their bodies. There's a lot of good things. They live longer. So there's a lot of good things about happiness itself that we should pursue. And a lot of this research came out long after my career in corporate America, so I didn't have the benefit of knowing this. But as a recovering engineer, one of the things that I found very comforting was that there is a happiness equation, right? You thought on a Sunday afternoon you didn't have to do any math, here it comes, right? So the happiness equation, H is your everlasting happiness. This isn't your temporary happiness that you feel, when you win 20 bucks on a scratch ticket or when you get flowers from your significant other. This is your everlasting sort of long-term happiness curve, if you will. The S is your set point. So basically, everyone's natural state of happiness is set by genetics. So if you're generally a happy person, you can thank your parents. If you're generally unhappy, you can blame your parents. It's all genetics. Your happiness your happiness level is about 50% due to your set point, right? So about 50%. The good news is the other elements allow you to control your happiness a bit more. C is for circumstances. This is the circumstances that surround you. If you live in a war-torn country struggling with civil war, you're generally going to be less happy than if you live in a stable democracy with a good economy. That kind of makes sense. Circumstances are also the people that surround you, the social group that you find yourself in. The thing about circumstances is, yes, you can change them, but usually they're very inconvenient and expensive to make a difference, right? It's hard to move out of a country, it's hard to move out of a city, it's hard to change a group of friends. You can do it, but it takes a little bit of effort. So circumstances, they're about 10% of your overall happiness. So it's hard to do, but it gives you a little bit of a boost. This is where you really can make some difference. So this is your voluntary activities. These are the things that you choose to do, whether it be the kind of work you do, the kind of volunteer experience that you have on the weekends, the kind of recreational things you do, anything that you do that's voluntary, that you have a decision point about, is V, or voluntary activities, and that makes up the rest of the 40% of your general overall happiness level. So again, like a good engineer, I look back on my life and I charted my happiness. So if you start on the left, I won't go through it in great detail because that's what I would have done as an engineer, but I will just give you the big picture here. On the extreme left is when I taught physics at WPI. On the extreme right is my career here at Bentley. In between, you can see peaks and valleys. The green line is my set point. I'm generally a happy person anyway. I think genetically I was kind of lucky that way. I'm generally a little bit happier than the average. Years ago, when I first met my wife, there was a song called "Don't Worry, Be Happy." She changed the lyrics to "Don't Worry, Be Pouliopoulos," right? Aww. So if you look at this diagram, right? Where there were, between my teaching at physics at WPI and my career here at Bentley, there was just a couple of points where my happiness exceeded my natural point. And there were about 3 troughs, 3 sort of dips under my natural set point. When I looked back, I realized the times that I was below my natural average sort of happiness level were the times that I allowed circumstance and voluntary decisions on my part to pull me down and make me unhappy. Where I surfaced and came out and had those peaks, those 2 little peaks in the middle of my career there, were moments where, again, circumstance or voluntary activities got me out of the trough. That first one, for a couple of years, when I first went into sales, it was a great role for me. I love teaching. Sales is a lot like teaching, making relationships, explaining complex concepts to prospects. It was fantastic. With that little trough that followed there, that's when I went into sales management. Guess what? You don't do those things as much in sales management. You argue with the CEO about the strategic direction of the company. You work with underperforming salespeople who don't want to be there. It's not as much fun, and it definitely didn't work on my strengths. So basically that little peak at the bottom of that small little trough in the middle was when I got fired. It gave me time to think about what I wanted to do next, and you see I came out of that, and I came up, and it was positive again. I took a job in a small team in a different large technology company, and for the first 3 years of that job, it was fantastic because my role was to go to conferences and speak to 2,000 people at a time about the products we have, to stand in front of an audience like this and just talk about our products and tell stories about how they could use it. And I went and I trained salespeople and business partners, and it was fantastic. And where the line drops below the line again is basically that company getting acquired by a much bigger company, and my role sort of being unilaterally changed. And as you can see, that last trough is the deepest one. I was at that company for 13 years, and really the last 10 years were the most unhappy for me career-wise, until that final lower point right before coming to Bentley when I was laid off with 10,000 other people, so I didn't take it personally. Now, when you look at happiness and you look at those troughs, you look at those, I call them tide pools. You know, little tadpoles get caught in tide pools. When the tide goes out, you get these little fish that are stuck in the ocean because they're in this sort of isolated body of water. The only time they can escape is when the tide comes back in. Those are external circumstances. You're waiting for something to change externally to make your happiness go up. fish don't really have a lot of free will, right? So basically, you can also get out of that tide pool by working on your inner happiness, by doing things that raises your happiness so you hit that set point and go higher, and when you're happy, you're optimistic and you can see more options in the future. So there are 3 areas that I tell people you should focus on to hack the happiness equation. The first one is tribe. These are the people that you surround yourself in. I don't include family in this because family are great supporters, but they often define you as who you were when you were younger. The first one is friends. There's research that says if you have regular and frequent contact with at least 10 friends, you'll live longer and be happier. Your happiness level will rise. For 40 years, I've had a dozen of my fraternity brothers from WPI, and when I look back over the 40 years in terms of our close friendship, I don't think we've gone more than 2 or 3 months without getting together for something social. For the last 27 years, my wife and I have hosted something we call Greek Thanksgiving. On the Saturday before Thanksgiving, yes, we invented Friendsgiving. Thank you. And most people show up every year for it, and the nice thing about it is because it's scheduled and you know it's going to happen every year, if you miss it, you know there's another one around the corner. So for you, when you graduate college, you've got to pull out that calendar and make those connections happen and get them on the calendar. Make it frequent, make it regular, make it so that if you miss one, you know there's a next one that you can go into. And then there's affinity. Who are the people that share your philosophies? Who are the people that you like to hang out with? I have an interest in happiness, and I reached out to a happiness expert in England named Andy Cope over Twitter, of all things. And we've formed this friendship now that has lasted for a couple of years. He's interviewed me for his podcast. I'm going over to England to talk to him about the work he does in positive psychology, all because I reached out and took action to meet someone who had my interest. You have to do that in order to grow your own happiness. When it comes to talent, you've all had your personality assessments done, and you kind of toss them away and think, well, that was pretty accurate. Go back and reread those and see what are the things that they're telling you you're really good at. And on top of that, one thing that you can do is every day for 2 minutes, sit down and write in your journal, what is the most memorable thing I did today? After a few weeks, you're going to see a pattern, and that pattern is going to basically tell you the things that you should be focused on doing in your career and in your life. Hustle. I don't mean just working hard, I mean side hustle. One of the factors that allowed me to come to Bentley and teach full-time is that I taught as an adjunct part-time instructor at 4 different colleges before I had a chance to come to Bentley. At one point, my wife told me, the only time that you're happy is when you come home from teaching a class at a college. Your day job is making you miserable. Big wake-up call, right? But that also gave me resume fodder so that when I applied for a full-time gig here at Bentley, it helped me get in the door. So work on your side hustle if you have to. And then thrill. And by this, I don't mean temporary thrill. I mean the thrill of being grateful to someone. The little dopamine hit that you get when you're grateful for someone who's done something for you or for anything that you're grateful for. A lot of you have these snap streaks going on. I don't have Snapchat. I don't know what those are. But I know that you snap each other somehow every day for like 300, 400, 800 days. Well, here's something you can try. If you want to build your level of happiness naturally, then instead of just sending some nonsense message back and forth, pick one thing that you're grateful for, anything, and send that as your snap message and get one back from your friend. And do that for 365 days and your happiness level will rise. Thankfulness. You've got to be thankful to the people that have helped you. A few years ago, I heard that one of my favorite teachers, one of my role models, was very ill, was in the hospital, and the prognosis was not very good. So I connected with her son, and I took some time to go visit her. Her name was Marion Jorgensen. She was an amazing English teacher. I hadn't seen her in over 30 years. So I went to her hospital. She didn't know I was coming. I knocked on the door. I walked in, and I said, "Hey, do you remember me?" And she looked at me and she said, "Well, yeah, you're Jimmy Pouliopoulos' father, right?" I said, "You're close. I am Jimmy Pouliopoulos. I just have my father's hairdo." We spent 2 hours reminiscing and talking about the 30 years that have passed between us. It was unbelievable. At the end of it, I took her hand, I looked her in the eye, and I thanked her for the impact that she'd had on my life as a teacher. To this day, when I talk about it, I get emotional, and I feel my happiness level rise. Pick up the phone, go visit someone that you need to thank, and you'll feel your happiness rise because of it. You can hack this happiness equation. You can use it in your favor. I tell people all the time, you should be sort of strategically selfish. You should worry about using your strengths and your skills. Because what the world needs is for you to bring your gift to the world. Don't define yourself by your degree or the expectations that everyone else has around you. Focus on your happiness. It'll raise your level of optimism. It'll open your eyes to opportunities. It'll allow you to pursue your potential in ways that you can't even imagine right now. And it'll give you a chance to bring your gift to the world. And hopefully you can get there in less than 30 years. Thank you.